What's up guys, Tricks Ridiculous back with another video, and in this one I've got my Ms. Marvel guide for you, my updated, new and improved, raid ready, support, melee range. This is a very well-rounded build. You'll actually be pleasantly surprised when you see all the things that this build can do. Ms. Marvel, the more I've been playing her, I kind of didn't really give her a fair shake, I think, when the game first came out, but the more I play her, the more I realize she is absolutely an S tier character in this game. And I've really, I think, put together a pretty sweet build that I think you guys are going to like a lot. So I'm going to kind of go through what makes this build unique, why it's special, a couple of maybe tips for Ms. Marvel that both new and maybe veteran, Ms. Marvel players may not know. So hopefully you'll learn something from this regardless. And just kind of show you this may even be one of the first builds that I bring into the raid. It is that good. It is that strong. It is that easy to use. So with that said, before we get into it, be sure to like and subscribe if you like these videos. It really does help the channel and I really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So just looking right here at my Ms. Marvel, my stats. So you'll see the stats are a little all over the place, and that's okay. We're focused primarily on might. We've got probably a little more proficiency than we need, but that's okay. I mean, really the big three things you want on pretty much any character are Valor, Resolve, and then your primary stat, either Might or Precision. In this case, this is a melee-centered build, so we are focusing mostly on melee, but there is a very, very powerful ranged component to it as well that you really don't need to spec into Precision to even worry about. And of course, being that it is Kamala, it is incredibly supporty, if that's a word, right? So really, really strong at supporting teammates. So I've kind of looked for the best way to incorporate a lot of different things into this build. Ms. Marvel really does get a lot of bang for her buck for minimal investment. So you'll see when I talk about support and when I talk about ranged, we're really not putting too much into our support abilities or our ranged abilities. We're not going so heavy into it, but what we do put into it is so valuable for the little investment that it takes that's what makes it good. Okay. So starting with the gear, now I'm using a Faultless Empowerment bands. This bands has Faultless Empowerment, of course, so that means chance on melee crit to grant an intrinsic burst. Okay, what does intrinsic burst do with Ms. Marvel, right? It keeps up polymorph. All right, so that's really why this build is a melee focused build. Okay, basically this build can keep up your polymorph pretty much indefinitely. So you'll see there I've got chance on melee crit, intrinsic burst, light combo finishers, vibranium, okay, and then increased crit hit chance for polymorph attacks. All right, so basically light combo finishers, vibranium, that is okay. Heavy combo finishers might have been a little bit better, but what counts as a light combo finisher? Well, essentially it would be, of course, your actual light combo finisher at the very end of it, right? So it's kind of a long charge up, but then boom, that's a vibranium attack right there. You can see these guys are vibraniumed up, right? Or at least almost. The other thing is your air attack, right? So if I jump in the air, it's only a 3-tap. Boom, and you see that kick at the end? That's actually a vibranium kick as well. Okay, so that's a light combo finisher. Now, in terms of Embiggen, all right, now in the air, it actually is not a light combo finisher. So that third hit on the Embiggen doesn't do vibranium, as you'll see. However, the final hit of the actual swipe with this, that is vibranium. So you see that guy just got vibed up, right? That's because the final hit there is vibranium. So really, really good because vibranium is a warm status effect, right? That pairs nicely with shock, sonic, right? Very, very popular kind of setup elements. Very good to have vibranium as a finisher element to really put out big damage on bosses and things like that, okay? Now, the other thing about it too, when we're not in Embiggen, like you saw here, Again, we've got that intrinsic burst and we've got crit hit chance for polymorph attacks, right? So you'll see just with this, if you look at the side of my screen, I'm in polymorph, right? But look at my intrinsic bar. I'm holding down, you obviously can't see me, but I'm holding down R2 right now, right? I'm in polymorph, but look at my intrinsic bar. Every so often, I just get intrinsic burst, all right? So it's just gonna keep me in that polymorph state. And remember, like that other piece, the piece of gear I have, I get an increased crit chance while I'm in polymorph, okay? And then also, of course, we get, as you know, you get increased, just a general damage increase, and you regenerate health while you're in polymorph. So this build is extremely tanky. The other thing, when you're in polymorph, you actually dodge yellow attacks, right? You kind of auto dodge yellow attacks. So this build, even though it's not a very high defensive build, it is still extremely tanky, just because Ms. Marvel herself has intrinsic healing, both from infinite uptime of your polymorph like we're going to have in this build, and of course our actual heal from our support heroic. That's going to be extremely important as well. Now, how does the range element work? Okay, so you'll see here I'm using a targeted empowerment armlet, right? So again, empowerment, that gives us intrinsic. So chance on hitting with a ranged crit to grant an intrinsic burst. I'm also using ranged spike scream, okay? So that's ranged attacks deal sonic, all right? Now, it's extremely important if you're looking for a piece like this, make sure you have ranged attacks deal sonic. Do not settle for held enemies continuously take sonic. It's counterintuitive, but that piece actually doesn't work for this. Even though it says held enemies continually take sonic, it actually doesn't do damage to held enemies. It only actually does the elemental damage when you slam the enemy with one of your grab attacks. But if you just have a basic ranged attacks deal sonics, crits deal additional sonic, that is going to give you sonic all the way through on all of your ranged attacks, okay? And then remember, targeted empowerment, hitting an enemy with a crit grants an intrinsic burst, right? So that's going to get us our intrinsic back. And then, of course, sonic, you guys know what being in a sonic aura does, right? It recharges both your intrinsic and your heroic. So you'll see in these clips here, we don't even have a lot of ranged damage, but you can see we're not doing a lot of damage to these guys, but we can hold them indefinitely. Look at my bar. Now, if you grab a guy, now if you don't know the actual way to do it, all you have to do is grab them and then just continually press square. If you press, if you're on Xbox, of course, that'll be X. But essentially, you can essentially hold a guy until your intrinsic bar runs out, okay? And in our case, because we've got a sonic field and we've got intrinsic burst triggering all the time, that's never going to happen, all right? Now, you can get hit out of this if enemies, hit you with strong attacks. They can knock you out of it. But in general, you can essentially hold an enemy forever, right? It doesn't matter, and I'll even show you on larger enemies. For most larger enemies, you can actually grab them while embiggened, okay? So any adaptoids except for the ice adaptoid, you can actually just grab. And same thing with exos. As long as you're embiggened, you can just grab them and hold them indefinitely, okay? So here you go. I'm holding this fire guy. Now, they might knock me out of this, but you'll see I can essentially just hold them indefinitely, and it doesn't matter. I'm not doing a lot of damage, right? Because we're spec'd into melee, not ranged, but it doesn't matter. There's no, the guy can't fight me back, right? So regardless of the damage we're actually doing, we can hold on to him forever. Now, of course, if I'm not in God mode, they're going to knock me out of this just in this happen to be, harm room here. But the other thing you might have noticed there is that the ultimate actually does stay up. So even if you run out of your embiggen, it actually stays at 1 second and lets you finish off your grab, right? So you can essentially hold them forever. This also works on Super Adaptoid and Taskmaster. If you shrink them with PIM and you are embiggened, you can hold both of them indefinitely. The clip at the beginning of the video was me holding Super Adaptoid. You might have seen it in older clips that I've had. That's not a new clip. But essentially, with this build, you can keep up your intrinsic nonstop, and it's going to let you hold that Super Adaptoid indefinitely. All right. Now you could also, just as kind of a backup or an alternate option to this, you can use a targeted buff here with Sonic. That could work as well. It won't give you the absolute, true infinite uptime. It'll give you a lot more uptime because of the Sonic, but it won't be truly infinite. However, it will give you that damage buff very regularly. So moving on to my next piece, I'm actually using damage buff on taking damage. So you might have noticed during those clips, I didn't actually have any damage buff just because I was in God mode, just showing it off. But Kamala, like I mentioned earlier, she's a tank, right? She takes a ton of damage. She's healing nonstop. And again, remember, like I said, this is a polymorph build. We're constantly in polymorph, so we're constantly healing. We're constantly just face rolling people. We're going to be taking a little bit of damage, right? We're not going to dodge everything. There's little things hit you in this game. Lasers hit you, smoke clouds hit you. Things hit you, right? And you take damage. So taking damage grants a damage buff, right? A very consistent, solid way of getting a damage buff. This works very well. If you already have a targeted buff, or you prefer to have targeted buff or even faultless buff on the melee, I wouldn't recommend faultless buff on the melee for Ms. Marvel just for this particular build, because you won't be able to keep up the polymorph. But you could have it on the ranged piece. That could work. If you have that, then by all means, go for something else in the armor slot here. Go for a reactive Jarvis barrier or a reactive defense buff, right? Either of those would be fine as well. All right, and then coming over to the exotic, of course, there's only one exotic you can really go for here. This is the Marvelous Regalia. This is Ms. Marvel's best piece by far. So I've got a pretty good roll on this one. This piece does come from the last Avengers standing mission. That's the 14-floor hive. All right, it is just a chance of it dropping, but the first time you do the hive every week is a slightly increased chance. All right, so it gives you, of course, the roll I got is Valor Resolve. I believe it can also drop Precision Valor Resolve. I'm going with the higher flat Valor Resolve just because we're not specking into precision in this case. We're specking more into might. So I happen to have one that just has Valor Resolve, which is great. But the static perks that it gets are a damage buff to any member affected by Team Spirit, 20%, and a crit attack chance bonus of 35% to any team member affected by Team Spirit, okay? So, of course, that is our support heroic, right? Now, this is just an absolute money support ability. And this is what I mentioned earlier, where this is where we're really getting the biggest bang for our buck, right? This piece is absolutely an MVP as far as assisting your teammates through your support heroic, okay? And it's a very low investment. It's still a very solid piece. What we would kind of miss out on would be having, you could technically get something here that has maybe, damage buff on killing 3 enemies, like you see this one, or, increased damage while embiggened, or takedowns do something, or heroic charge burst, whatever. There's a lot of random perks that can roll on heroic gear pieces. But to take advantage of these unique perks, I think is worth the exotic slot. So that's where, just between all of this, that's where Ms. Marvel really does become kind of that well-rounder. You've got this exotic piece for support, right? You get your damage buff, pretty standard. And then you've got a very interesting 1-2 punch here, Vibranium and Sonic, right? With intrinsic, polymorph up all the time, very defensive, high melee damage, but also can grab and hold people indefinitely, for those ranged kills as well. Honestly, I mean, it's a really fun build to play, and it's really, like I said, it's really well-rounded for kind of minimal investment in some of the non-melee, pieces here. And then, of course, coming over to our artifacts, right? Red ISOs, no mystery here. Ideally, one pretty similar to this one on the right that has increased crit hit chance for mid-air melee attacks. Like I mentioned, the light combo finisher is better from the air because it can give you that vibranium on just every third hit versus the long-winded combo on the ground. And even like I mentioned earlier, even if I have light combo finishers, it's very possible you get heavy combo finishers. That's also really good too. And even in that same case, I would still recommend crit chance for mid-air melee, because the heavy combo finisher that you really want is this one here, right? This is a really strong attack, and ending on that heavy combo finisher, this can really put in a lot of work. It is a few more hits, but it does a lot more damage than the light combo attack from the air. So again, it is an air attack. So if you have double aerial boon on here, you'll be getting 12% increased crit chance from that mid-air melee. And then again, if you've got the polymorphs boon, keep your polymorph up. That's another 11 and change percent. So you're already looking at 24% plus crit chance just on basically on all attacks just from that. So really, really good, really easy, smooth melee build right there. And then just for the major exotic, we're using the Nornstone of Lethal Will. Just in this particular case, because I only have damage buff coming from one source, it is still pretty consistent. I do get it very regularly. However, just the increased duration by 4 seconds is just nice to kind of keep it a little more consistent. You could, however, use, a Ring of Nebelung as well. Ms. Marvel, at least this particular build, she doesn't really generate her own orbs too often. But if you are in a team of 4 and you've got other characters on your team that are generating, orbs for the whole team, by all means, throw on the Ring of Nebelung. It is absolutely fine, and you'll kind of go into more of that support build, right? That'll really help you activate your Embiggen and activate your support heroic more regularly. The other thing you might want to consider just leveling up just to have it, if you've got leftover polys, is the Void Tech Transponder. The reason this can be good is because for bosses like Super Adaptoid and Taskmaster and possibly others that come to the game, you can grab certain bosses after they've shrunk. Now, if you are playing with teammates, if they have a way to shrink bosses, that's fine. Or, you don't have to have Vibranium. I'm just happen to be using Vibranium here. You could definitely get this with Pym, for example, and be able to shrink bosses yourself. That would be good as well. But if you don't have a way to get Pym, definitely worth just getting one of these leveled up as well, because you can actually summon Hank Pym. He'll shrink the boss for you, and then you can give the boss the squeeze with your infinite grab attack, right? So very, very easy to do that as well. That's pretty much it, guys. As far as the skills, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, standard Kamala stuff. I'll just go through it kind of quickly. Will to Live for the additional charge of Healing Spirit, and then Inner Peace. This is going to extend that duration, right? So the residual effect by 8 seconds. Now, that does also include the crit chance that we're getting from our, the crit chance and the damage buff from the Marvelous Regalia. So, of course, we're going to want to spec into the extra duration, right? That works really well. The other thing you could potentially use is, you can activate it while someone's downed to revive them, in which case you might want to flip over here to the extra charge here. This was pretty useful in Super Adaptoid fights. If things got a little hairy, you could kind of get yourself back up, keep the team in the fight. I don't think it's really super necessary. If you feel like you're getting downed a lot, then by all means switch to this. But if you're playing this build pretty similar to how I have it, you should be tanking quite a lot, especially just through your polymorph. And your constant healing through polymorph, that you really shouldn't worry too much about it. And you will be getting your healing spirit back pretty quickly anyway. For the assault heroic, so I use Too Slow. I think this is the best one just because it can hit kind of the most enemies all at once. I usually only use this on smaller enemies, droids, big groups of droids, groups of, synthoids, whatever the case may be. And then because of that, I end up using, of course, patty cake, chance of generating heroic orbs. It's not often, but if you do use it with too slow, it's only a 25% chance, which is fine because it's the most, AoE one that you can do. But if you do it on like droids or, just generally use it on larger groups of very weak enemies to just crowd control them, it's very possible you'll get 2 or 3, orbs shoot out of that. And then over to the ultimate heroic. Now, I use Big Trouble, increases the duration by 5 seconds. I think this is the best one in this tree. And then on the right-hand side, this one is dealer's choice. You can go with Fists of Fury, defeating enemies while embiggened extends the duration by 1 second. You can also go with Fists of Glory. Defeating an enemy while embiggened has a 25% chance to drop a heroic orb. These two are pretty close. If you are in the situation where you're in a team of 4 and you're using the Ring of Nebelung instead of the damage buff artifact, then I would strongly recommend Fists of Glory instead. But if you are, just trying to be more, individually damaging and not so much of a support, then go with the Fists of Fury. It'll keep your embiggened up just a little bit longer there. And then into the mastery tree, really not much to say here. The only perks that really, matter at all, I'll say, are this one right here, the middle ranged perk here, Grab Efficiency, reduces the cost of holding an enemy by 40%. This is extremely important. Without this, we cannot go infinite on our grabs, all right? So very important that you have this. And then the other piece here that I find myself changing kind of regularly is the ranged concussive mastery here. Now, I am currently using the concussive blast, so your ranged attack deals a kind of explosion on impact. That is good. You can also use the bottom one here, ranged pierce, so it actually goes through enemies and just kind of pierces. Honestly, I keep flipping back and forth trying to figure out which one of these is better. And honestly, it's so dealer's choice. I mean, they're both good. Either one of these is worth using. It's really just personal preference. If you feel like the damage explosion feels better to you versus actually piercing enemies, if that kind of feels like it's stronger for you, go with that one. But honestly, that's the one that you can kind of customize a little bit. Otherwise, just copy this tree exactly as is. It's all pretty standard, Kamala stuff. So that's what I'm going for there. And then on the champion side, no surprise here. We're going for really the only ones that matter. The heroic charge rate, the perk chance boost, and then crit chance and crit damage. The other one that you can go for with Ms. Marvel is the fortification boost, which of course it gives you 1% armor, per level for a total of 5% armor, which translates to a flat 5% damage mitigation. That one can work pretty nice with this build too, of course, with all of our healing. But honestly, guys, that is it. That is the build. It is really, really fun to play. Definitely give it a chance. The infinite polymorph, you're going to be on cloud 9. You're going to be loving it. You're going to be unkillable. You're going to be smashing everybody. And to be honest, there's not that many viable melee builds in the game. A lot of the top builds are ranged builds, just because ranged in this game is, more conducive to status effects, a lot easier to kind of, I guess I'll say, make work at a high level. So this is really one of the melee builds that can really make it work. And then, like I said, when you need to go into that ranged category, if you need to, snag an exo while you're embiggened and just take them out of the fight, even an exo that has an incredible amount of health like the elite ones, just grab them, squeeze them, keep pressing square, keep pressing X, if you're on Xbox, and he will go down and you will just squeeze him indefinitely and never lose your intrinsic at all, never drop him. So really, really helpful for the team, in my opinion. And you'll also be spreading, even if you're just attacking with your melee, you'll be spreading Sonic pretty easily throughout here. Her ranged attack, especially if you have damage buff and you're dealing crits, it can spread Sonic very, very easy, especially if you're using, the Pierce, either the Pierce or the Concussive Blast. They both will spread it very quickly if you're critting guys. So you'll definitely be, spreading Sonic pretty much all the time. While you're holding guys and squeezing them, they will also be Sonic. So, of course, they'll be right next to you. You'll be getting the effects of the Sonic, and you'll effectively be a battery for your teammates to also get that Sonic effect as well. So really, really strong, works really well, and your teammates will thank you for playing this build. Give this a try. Let me know. Of course, if you don't know, the vibranium gear like this can be farmed using my vibranium farm. I'll have a link to that video down in the description. But I mean, the Sonic one's really the only one that's mandatory. This is a vibranium one. I just happen to like it, but if you get a pretty similar piece to this, but it happens to have Pim or it happens to have Cosmic, totally okay as well. The build will work just as good with that. But anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in this one. I hope you liked this video. If you did, leave me a like. Be sure to subscribe for more and leave me a comment down below. Let me know how you are playing Ms. Marvel and who you are taking into the raid for your very first raid. That's it for me, guys. I will see you in the next one.